Marco,
Sean.
you know where I want to be today?
What?
Well, I'm happy I'm here because Rob's here.
Yeah. I'm happy I'm here too. And I know why you wanted me to be on this one, because you don't trust me.
I don't trust you.
And we're talking about zero trust.
Zero trust.
Absolutely.
See,
How apt.
I had the script on this one.
No, the reason I'm joking is there's a car being given away somewhere else, not right here.
There is
And
definitely a car being
I want to
given
be
away.
a cyber hero for ThreatLocker,
I want to be a cyber villain.
so I can get a nice car. Cyber villain. No, but the program you have, the cyber hero program, is pretty dang cool.
It's very cool. It's very cool.
Maybe we'll touch on that a bit. But before we get into all the fun stuff that ThreatLocker's up to, the pizza you're going to have, the cars you're giving away, let's remind everybody who Rob Allen is.
So Rob Allen is the Chief Product Officer.
Is he a good guy?
Sometimes. If you get him on a good day.
Good day.
Occasional Chief Podcast Officer.
Okay.
Sometimes Chief Pineapple Officer as well. Don't ask about that one, please.
All right. Is that any connection to the pizza?
No, not that kind of pineapple.
All right, very good.
This is more the
different.
hacking device
got it.
kind of
yes.
pineapple.
A
But
little slow there on the
I've
uptake.
I've passed on the title of, well, actually I've nominated somebody else to be Chief Pineapple Officer.
Okay.
Thankfully, because
And you send them to DEF CON. Good man.
yeah, I've had bad experiences with pineapples. But yeah, as I said, occasional Chief Podcast Officer, but mostly Chief Product Officer.
Very good. And he builds some good products. We heard the feedback from the customers at Zero Trust World. It's good stuff.
Yes.
Good stuff.
But we are at RSAC Conference.
We are.
Just
We
in
are.
case people didn't notice.
Yeah.
Or
People listening, they're wondering
Or here.
what's
Another
going
good
on.
conference. I mean, other conferences are available.
No, I know.
This is one of them.
This is one of them.
Not as good as Zero Trust World,
It's one of
obviously,
them,
but
and you know, you are the Chief Podcast Officer, because we already chat with you a few times.
Yes, we have.
And
Yes.
it's exciting that we're actually going to do here on the floor. So, anything interesting that you've seen around? Maybe it was that you expected.
Well, actually, I was here last year, so I kind of knew what to expect. I mean, obviously, it's huge. There are a great many people, but both of those things are good, because a great many people is a great many opportunities to speak to people, which is basically why we're here. A lot of customers. One great thing about events like these is year on year, there's more and more customers. So where, 2-3 years ago we might have had a handful of customers here, now we might have 20, 30, 40, 50 customers, all of whom want to come up, say hello, have a conversation. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to do
and
that.
I know, because again, we spoke before, and how important this conversation with the customers are.
Absolutely.
And we have been able to hear both sides, so everybody benefits from this conversation. So anything interesting you heard?
As I said, like I've had quite a large customer of ours actually come up yesterday, and they had some really good ideas around our privileged access management or elevation control solution. I mean, it's where, quite frankly, a lot of our good ideas come from, is when somebody says, it would be really cool if you could do X. And very often, if somebody's wish for it to do something is that important for them to suggest it to us, it's probably something that will benefit other customers as well.
Right.
So very often it's something that we'll try and make happen.
Yeah, that's really good.
What's your sense of, obviously with your customer base, they probably recognize what Zero Trust is, what it means to them, how you help them with achieving whatever that is to them. When you branch out beyond a large group like this, how does that conversation sound in terms of solidifying or nailing down what Zero Trust is? We've talked about it being a mindset in many cases. Do you find that a large group like this has a common, real understanding of what's going on with respect to Zero Trust, or is it still a lot of education required?
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I mean, obviously there would be a fairly I don't want to say well-educated attendees here, but I mean in terms of cybersecurity, so a lot of the people here would be quite well versed, shall we say, from a cybersecurity perspective. Most of them would know, broadly speaking, what Zero Trust is. Most of them would probably have an idea that Zero Trust would be a good idea, would be something they should look at implementing. a lot of them realistically don't know where to start, which I suppose is largely where we come in and we say, well, look, these are the things that we can do for you. These are the steps that we can help you take to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Right. And let's quickly run through maybe what an accelerated, brief view of what some of those steps might be, so folks, so they have that in mind.
I suppose to some extent, I mean, the first step is the first step. So it's about starting somewhere. It's about saying, look, this is something we want to do. Okay, how are we going to do it? Now, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet for this problem. It's not a product you go out and buy. It is a series of steps you can take. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a mindset fundamentally. Now, how
does it start with policy? Does it start with scoping? Does it start with business? Does it start with risk?
All of those things.
Anywhere.
I was going to say all of those things. I mean, realistically, it starts from our perspective. It starts with visibility. Because in order to apply controls, in order to get to a point where you can fundamentally default deny, you need to have visibility over what's there. You need to know what's running in your machines. You need to know what software is present before you can then make decisions as to whether, well, actually, is this thing needed or not, or should I be blocking that? Or just getting to the point where you can lock everything down and say, right, nothing new is going to be allowed to run unless I explicitly allow it. So visibility very much is the first step in terms of, and that's just deploy an agent and let it do its thing.
Right.
There's no heavy lift involved in that.
It used to be a heavy lift.
It used to be a very heavy lift, but realistically that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in. We take away a lot of that hard work. As I said, we deploy an agent, we let it learn. It's going to build policies automatically, so you don't have to sit there and figure out, well, Marco needs this software and this software and this software in his machine, and Sean needs all of these different pieces of software.
Right.
We're going to see all those things, we're going to create policies automatically, and that takes a lot of the hard work, a lot of the heavy lifting out of this. But again, what it provides you fundamentally is visibility. So I can see, hang on a second, Marco's running Putty. Say that for me, Marco.
Putty. What is that?
Putty.
Putty?
Sorry, I had to throw that one in, Marco. So Marco's running Putty on his machine. Does he need that? I mean, it's been used for data exfiltration.
I do need it.
But equally, you could use that for data exfiltration. I mean, we have seen it being used for data exfiltration. So then you can make a decision, well, maybe he does need it, maybe he doesn't. I mean, purely for entertainment purposes, I think we should allow him to run it and say it regularly.
Yes, repeatedly on many podcasts.
Every day.
But yeah, as I said, you can then make decisions. You can then start to get to the point where you can lock down your environments.
So let me follow up with this, because maybe a view into the current state for many still, where it's difficult to get that visibility and maybe even some semblance of control. I've heard many times GPO's there, group policy orchestrator, right, is there. Not every company uses it. It is a way to kind of get to a point, but that's a pain in the neck, and which is probably why many don't use it. What obviously the alternative is to learn, but I guess kind of paint a picture of what you see if organizations attempt to get to zero trust using tools that aren't ThreatLocker.
With tools that aren't ThreatLocker is it's a lot of work. It's fundamentally it's a heavy lift. I mean, I've spoken to organizations who have spent years trying to implement other solutions, other tools that are out there, and fundamentally failing, not even getting to the point where they can turn it on. It's just so much work, it's so much hassle. They're afraid to turn it on because it's really hard to configure, and it's a lot of manual intervention fundamentally. So as I said, that is one thing that we pride ourselves on, is we take away a lot of the hard work. I mean, fundamentally our mission was to make this possible, because in most environments, in most cases, it wasn't possible. I mean, for example, you might be able to deploy something like AppLocker on a server, and because that's a relatively static environment, there's not a lot of software going on, you might be able to maintain that and be able to run it. But if you introduce something like that into a dynamic environment where people are running lots of different software and things are updating all the time, it just becomes completely unmanageable. So as I said, that's kind of the secret sauce. We make it possible, attainable, achievable.
I know Marco wants to jump in with some
listening.
Putty, but do you change the operating environment? You don't change the way the infrastructure looks to achieve.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, what we do is we set guardrails around what people are doing. I mean, there's two parts to default deny. I mean, the first part is obviously the default deny, or deny by default. the second part is the permit by exception.
Right.
Now, the permit by exception, the default deny is what's going to keep you safe. The permit by exception is what's going to allow organizations to run, because you need to be able to run things, you need to be able to do what you need to do. And fundamentally, all we do, broadly speaking, is we set guardrails around that and say, look, operate between these guardrails and you're not even going to know we're here.
Right.
Okay, but try and download a coupon clipper from China or run a remote access tool that hasn't been allowed. Absolutely, we're going to step in and block that. But again, most users don't do that often. Most users do the same thing in the same way with the same software pretty much every day.
Right. So I don't want to monopolize.
No, I enjoy. I mean, I'm learning a lot, and you guys get very, a little bit more on
We get
on the
passionate
operation of this. But I want to bring it a little bit outside again in terms of the concept of zero trust. Scares a lot of people. I know you guys are trying to do it, and you're doing it in a way that it's not overwhelming. But it's also a mindset. And so I want to talk a little bit of the mindset of working with the zero trust model.
Well, I mean, look, there's lots of different ways to describe it. There's lots of different ways to explain to people. I mean, fundamentally, one of my favorite descriptions of it is to assume breach. It was actually the executive order from a couple of years ago mandating zero trust for the federal government, or anything to do with the federal government, actually explained what it is. And one of the definitions, or one of the parts of the definition, was to assume a breach is inevitable or has already occurred, and constantly limit access to only what is needed. And I love that definition, because when you apply that, or when you consider that, then fundamentally everything we do makes sense, which is assume they're already in. So bad guys are on my server right now, they've got full domain admin privileges. What can they do? And the sad fact is, in most environments, the answer is quite a lot. I mean, data exfiltration is trivial, as I said, whether it's using tools like PuTTY or PowerShell or curl or whatever mechanism they choose. I mean, a lot of it's sitting in an environment already, and a lot of it really hard to detect. I mean, fundamentally, if your strategy, if your approach is to wait for something bad to try and run, then it's probably already too late. I mean, your data's already out there, it's for sale in the dark web, and it's a cleanup operation at that stage. So that's why what we try to encourage people is to take a more proactive approach. So rather than, as I said, waiting for something bad to run, we're going to control the environment in such a way that they can't get to the stage where they're going to be deploying ransomware. I mean, obviously they're not going to be able to deploy ransomware, but in most breaches there is, potentially months worth of activity prior to that, where they burrow, they evaluate the environment, they try and figure out what's there, what they can steal, what's valuable, how much money they can ask you for, what your cyber insurance is going to pay out, what your bank accounts show, so how much money you have in your account. These are all valuable pieces of information for an attacker. I mean, the sweet spot seems to be somewhere around 30% of your money in the bank is what they will ask for now, plus what your cyber insurance will pay out. Because they're not going to ask for 100% of what you have in the bank, because that's going to shut any business down, and they're just not going to pay it. So they try and make it uncomfortable enough to be uncomfortable for everyone.
That tipping point where it's easy to pay.
Exactly. But again, finding that information, evaluating where that information is stored, getting access to it, that fundamentally takes them time. But as I said, rather than waiting for now ransomware is running, our approach is to control the environment in such a way that it makes their lives really difficult, and also more likely that they will be discovered as they try and get around or to circumvent the controls that are there.
I like to say that it's common sense, but it's not that common.
Common sense is unfortunately not as common as you might like.
But when you think about it, it's the same approach you have to be healthy. It's, if you work on prevention, then you don't have to deal. Well, it may happen because it could be inevitable, but you kind of manage it.
Absolutely. But I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective, both approaches are valid. Both approaches have value. But both approaches work best when combined. So when you talk about proactive preventative and also reactive, effectively detection is reactive.
You need both.
You need both, absolutely. But what we have seen for many years is that a lot of customers, a lot of prospects rather, have basically stacked up on the detection end. So they have lots of different tools fundamentally doing the same thing in different ways. So they might have antivirus, they might have EDR, they might have MDR, they might have 3 or 4 different levels of detection tools, fundamentally all looking for the same threats and very often falling over each other when they actually find them. So what we try to encourage people to do is, well, look, a proper layered defense involves different types of protection, involves different types of solutions. So yes, absolutely have detection, and we have our own detection product, but combine that or layer that along with controls.
Yep.
And again, the controls are what are going to keep you safe. The detection, ideally, is what's going to tell you something is going on, but when it's not allowed to happen, if that makes sense. So rather than responding to an active, ongoing attack, you're effectively responding to indicators of compromise for somebody basically banging their heads against the wall that is ThreatLocker. As I said, trying to get around it, trying to do what they're being, realistically not allowed to do or not able to do, and that gives you time to respond.
And it's easier to detect when it's less than you have to detect instead of a crowd of
Absolutely.
Of all of that.
Absolutely. And again, it's one of the biggest problems with a lot of detection tools is false positives.
Yep.
I mean, you
a lot
spend
of noise.
It's like the boy who cried wolf. I mean, these things are shouting, go, look over here, there's something going on here. And when you actually look, I mean, I've literally spoken to customers who've told us to me about various products that they use. I say, look, well, how is it? Is it good? Is it valuable? And they go, yeah, it's fantastic.
How many wolves are there, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, but the false positives drive me insane because I'm always looking for this thing or that thing, and there's nothing actually going on. I mean, I had a really good example of a guy. An example we use is just exfiltration via PowerShell. So it's just one-line PowerShell script that copies data from here to our blob. I spoke to a customer about a competitor product he was using, and he mentioned the false positive thing, and that it broke his heart that he was constantly responding to these nothing going on. So I mentioned the exfiltration, and he said, do you mind if I try that on my machine now? And I said, no, absolutely, go right ahead. So we ran the exfiltration script. It stole the data from his machine, not a peep out of his other tool. So when there was something malicious actually happening, it did nothing.
Right.
But as I said, he's been chasing false positives all day, every day.
Yep.
Interesting. I know we're coming up on the end here, so I'm going to throw you a zinger. Because I was, just to make it fun, I was at a legal conference a few weeks back. A bunch of lawyers, law practices, inside counsel, talking about AI-driven code, vibe coding, agentic AI, and of course, hidden in there is all the API-driven stuff and microservices. And I'm thinking, here are people that are not technologists, talking about AI and coding and building apps and building services and using a bunch of stuff. How does that world impact what you see, and how does Zero Trust deal with that, I guess, is really the question I'm trying to figure out.
Well, short answer is beautifully.
Okay.
But I'll
because it's all new, and
well,
then it's
no,
denied by default. Because then you're not enabling the business, right?
I'll give you an example. So, I mean, you're talking about things like polymorphic malware, for example, or
right.
obfuscated using LLMs, that kind of stuff. I mean, I've done my fair share of that, and it's really cool. I mean, fundamentally, it's lowering the barrier of entry to malicious actors. So once upon a time you needed a specific set of skills to be able to code, to be able to make malware. Now, realistically, all you need is bad intentions. Because you can go to LLM and say, well, look, I need code to do this, and then I need code to do that, and we put these two pieces of code together, and all of a sudden you've got malware. So the dangers are there, but I'll give you one other very quick example, which was, there was a story in the news last week about it was a CEO of a cyber security company who was arrested for putting malware on a hospital's devices. Now, it turns out it was actually a piece of PowerShell. So it was literally just a PowerShell script or piece of PowerShell that was taking a screenshot and uploading it to a location. Now, I managed to get my hands on that PowerShell, and I gave it to ChatGPT, and I said, look, I want to do this, I want to put it here instead of there, and I want to do it into a folder, and I want to do it every 1 minute rather than every 10 minutes. It did everything that I needed. Yeah. And I didn't need any skills to do that. So the fact is, it is being misused as much as it is being used. And realistically, in a lot of cases, the bad guys have no limits on what they can do. There's no restrictions. They don't operate in boxes. They work very much outside the boxes, where unfortunately in a lot of cases defenders do. Yeah. But the beauty about it is, when you deny by default, you don't need to respond to each individual threat. You don't need to know what's going on, particularly. You just need to apply controls, and then the things that they might otherwise misuse can't be misused.
I love it.
Well, I think with conversations like this, it makes people think about the way they view the problem and really change the perspective that they can think about it. So with 1 minute to go or less, I'm going to say putty another time.
Ah,
So make you happy,
Say putty.
right?
booty.
And
Putty.
yeah.
No, I'd
putty.
say putty,
Putty.
but
Let's say putty.
That makes me
I want to
happy.
thank you for this conversation, and I hope we're going to have many more.
Yes.
absolutely, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And I invite everybody to check out what ThreatLocker is doing, because it's a concept that, as you said, it's going to help. Not going to resolve completely the problem. It takes more things, more tools, but it's
There's no
definitely
silver bullet.
a big door and wall.
It gives
to-
you a chance to do some of the other stuff.
exactly.
Fighting
And
chance.
Sean, more conversation coming up.
More conversations with ThreatLocker, more conversations from RSAC Conference, itspmagazine.com/RSAC25 for more. Stay tuned. Please subscribe, share with your friends and enemies. We'll catch you on the next one.
Stay tuned.